Hi guys, I'm Renée and I'm back with another video, and today is time for my recent reads video because I have read quite a few books over the last couple of weeks that I haven't talked about in a weekly wrap-up because I didn't have very many books the first week or the next week, but I have gathered some books now that I need to talk about and that I haven't reviewed on my channel yet since I read them, so this is that video. Since last time I did a weekly wrap-up, I have read 7 things, so let's get into them. The first book that I read in October was Firestarter by Stephen King. This is the next book in the Stephen King reading project that I'm doing, except I still need to read The Dead Zone, which I'm still working on, but this was an audio, so it went by quicker, and I still try to get through a Stephen King book sort of monthly. At least I'm aiming towards that. I listened to this in audio, as I said, and the audio is narrated by Dennis Boutsikaris, and honestly, it was not my personal type of audio narration style. It was a little bit monotonous in the way that it was narrated, but it wasn't terrible. It was just not amazing. And this book follows. We start out by seeing, but with this man and woman that comes to be a part of this project, this secret project that goes on, and something goes wrong, and they both get a sort of psychic abilities, both of them, in that part of that program, and they have a baby. They're man and wife. They have a baby, and that said baby also has a specific power that makes her have an ability to put things on fire, basically at will. So that is why it's called the Firestarter. And then things happen. The girl is being taken hostage or something like that. And even though they are trying to tell her that she's there because she's under protection, they're trying to see how they can help her and all of that. But instead they're basically using her and trying to figure out what she can do so that she doesn't accidentally put things on fire. But she's separated from her father, and she obviously starts missing him a lot. And her father doesn't know where she is, so he's also trying to find her. It was a pretty interesting book, but to me personally, it was not my favorite Stephen King for sure. I think there was something in this overall story arc that lacked a little bit, but I did enjoy it. It was not a bad story. He's good at creating characters that you believe in, and I really enjoyed this. We saw a lot of the perspective from this girl, and she was about 8 years old, and I think that he wrote those passages really, really well. And so I ended up on a 3.5 stars out of 5 stars for this book. The next book that I read was Red Fox by Karina Halle. I enjoyed the first book quite a lot. I mean, I didn't really like the characters, but I remember enjoying the horror, the paranormal aspect of the story. They were ghost hunters going out to different... it started out with this girl, the main character, wanting to go to this lighthouse and find out that it was haunted, and meets up with this guy called Dex, who's there to try and film things because he's also heard that it's haunted. And so they unwillingly team up and try to figure it out, and afterwards they decide to start working together with this YouTube channel that is called Experiment in Terror. And so now with the second book, they're going to explore one of the other places that they have heard that's haunted, and so they go to a small town in the desert, and because they've heard that something is amiss, there's something happening, animal farms are being killed and stuff like that. And so they go to this small town to try and figure out what's going on. And yeah, things start happening pretty quickly. I really did not very much enjoy this book. There were passages that were okay in the paranormal aspect, but honestly, the characters are so terribly badly written. I don't know how I'll feel about reading on in this. The main character is slut-shaming and calling people out, and really just a terrible person, and her parents are the worst. and she's lying to everybody around her. And I don't really like Dex. Dex is really difficult to figure out. And then there's a moment in this book where the main character is being attempted raped. Is out for an attempt rape. And it's just like it's there, but nothing happens. She doesn't deal with, there's nothing to deal with. They don't go to the hospital or anything afterwards. She's been drugged and is almost been raped. And they don't go to a hospital at all to get checked out to make sure that she's okay. And afterwards, there's nothing said about this thing. It's just that they go home, she falls asleep, and then there's nothing else. The next day, she's just fine. Nothing happened. Like, nothing happened at all. And it's just really off. And I felt like that specific moment was just added to create more drama in a book that didn't need it. And it was already really very much too long. And yeah, it just had some things that were unnecessary. And when it came down to it, by the big reveal towards the end, it was also really badly written. So I end up on a 2 stars for this book. And yeah, I do have the next book because I got them both pretty cheap. They were on sale one day for like $1 each, the second and the third. And I will read that and see, because people have said that that's when this becomes better. But yeah, at this point, we'll see how it goes with that one. And yeah. And then I'll decide if I want to continue with the series. The next book I read was Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is, I also listened to in audio form, as well as I had this alongside. But I mainly just listened to the audio as I was doing stuff around here at home. And I listened to the audio that is narrated by Gerry O'Brien. I had so many different audios to choose between, but some of them were abridged versions, so you had to make sure you didn't pick those, and others were had multiple narration styles, and I just tried to listen to the ones that I felt like I connected the most with, and took that one. And I thought he did a pretty good job in narrating it. It's not like a favorite or anything, but a pretty great job. And this obviously is the story about Dracula. It's pretty well known. It follows the story about Dracula and what happens on this, I don't know, castle, what do you call it? In Transylvania and stuff, and how weird things happens, and you find out that Dracula is a vampire and all of that stuff. I think my main issue with this book is that it is written in diary form, and I've never connected with that style. Otherwise, I didn't think it was as dryly written as I was fearing, because I have had my issues with classics in the past, where I've had difficulties getting into stories because I was a little bored with the writing style. But this was okay. And I think that the beginning of the book was pretty interesting. I think that the first 100 pages or so was really interesting and very intriguing. And then the last part was pretty great too, but there was a middle section that was a little underwhelming. And there were some of the characters that I didn't really like as well. I don't have much to say about it. I end up on a 3 stars for this. It was not terrible, but it was not great either. I'm happy I read it. I have it off my TBR for now. The next book that I read was Wildfire by Ilona Andrews. This is her third and final book in the Hidden Legacy series. And this was also a book that I listened to in audio form. And this was narrated by Renée Raudman. I think Raudman. I'm not sure how to say her name, pronounce her last name, but she did a really great job. She's really one of the best narrators I've listened to over the past couple of weeks. This is set in Austin, Texas, I believe. I think it was Austin, but it's definitely set in Texas. And just her accent fit really well with that. She had sort of a southern accent, and it worked well for me, as it wasn't too heavy an accent, but just like a feel of it, and I think I like that. And this is the third in the series, so it's difficult to talk much about the plot of this specific book, but it follows this girl called Nevada, or that's what she's called by the male lead. And in this world, there are people who have different magical abilities that has to do with psychics abilities, like you can, or elementally elemental type of magic stuff. And the main character is a truth seeker, so she can know if people are telling the truth or if they're lying. And so she uses that power in her job as a private investigator. In the job, she finds she has to work with this guy called Mad Rogan. That's what he's called. He also has a magic ability. This is really annoying. When I'm trying here, sitting here filming, my sisters and brothers are sending me text messages. And it goes onto my MacBook as well. But they find they have to work together in order to solve this case, and things happen. And there's some things that happens in the first that has roots in the third book towards the mystery. So I think that was done well. I just really overall enjoyed this book. I love this narrator. I love the characters. I love the story. And so I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. The next thing that I finished was Valhalla, den Samlede Saga, the collected sagas by Peter Madsen. It's a author team, but they go by Peter Madsen. Peter Madsen is also the artist and the writer, but there are 3 other guys working on the story alongside him. This particular collection includes volume Valhalla 7, 8 and 9. And the first one is called The Worm in the Deep, I think, if I wish to translate it correctly, directly. And the next one is called Freya's Jewelry. And the last one in this collection is called The Great Challenge. And the first story follows one of the biggest myths in Norse mythology surrounding Thor, or Thor, whatever you want to call him. I call him Thor. There's a legend saying that he went and tried to fish the Midgard serpent. And if you know anything about Norse mythology, you know that the Midgard serpent is gigantic, like really, really big, like takes up this all the 7 seas. So yeah. But what happens is, in this one, they take the myth to try and understand why did Thor do this, because obviously it seems like too big of a challenge that nobody could be that stupid. But what would make Thor go and try to catch this Midgard serpent? And that would only be if he was challenged and called a weakling for not doing it. So yeah, this is basically him and Tyr having a bit of a moment where they're trying to figure out who's the strongest and greatest warrior of the 2 gods. And yeah, so that is why Thor goes out on that quest. And the second one is about Freya and how she's the love goddess, and this is set in the springtime, so everyone are like lovey-dovey people. And this is follow a story about the jewelry that Freya has and how she got it. There's some talk about how she got it from these dwarves, but no one really knows how she got it. And so yeah, it involves Odin, Heimdall, and Loki as the main characters besides Freya, and it makes for an interesting story. It definitely shows how different Freya is compared to Loki. Freya is very honest, and she's very she would never lie to anyone, and she doesn't understand how anyone could lie to other people and be cruel like that. And she's trying to make people understand, if you're in it for love, you are both in it for the physical and the mental part of oneself or the other person that you are interested in. It's not only like the physical aspects or the you want them for the mental aspect. And this definitely shows Freya on a good side for the most part. And yeah, I liked it so more or less. And the last and final story in here is called The Great Challenge, and that is talking about how Thor had a fight with this really big giant, and how that myth woven into the Valhalla stories. And it basically is about how Thor suddenly might have another kid. And we don't know exactly how that happened and why. Only that he is to prove himself in order for Thor to believe him. And then we have Tjalfe, who is the human guy who is one of Thor, and Sif, who is Thor's wives. They're not servants. They are servants. They're helpers. But Tjalfe is trying to make Thor take him with him to different things, and so he's trying to impress Thor in different ways. And then they go to Utgard to fight with this giant. The son also has to prove that he's a son of Thor in order to be accepted in Valhalla, because he's a Jotun. I still have not found out what you call them. I think they have many names in English actually. But yeah, I thought that the first one was a little slow. It had parts that was really great, and the second one was my favorite. The one with Freya was my favorite, and the last one was also a little not so great. This has definitely been my least collection of the 3 that I've read, but I end up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. But I do still enjoy these, and I enjoy the myths and stories behind it that I get afterwards. There's like every time there's like 10 to 20 pages about the myths surrounding it and the art process and all of that. The next thing I read was Gunner Creek Court, Volume 1 by Thomas Siddle. This is the first in a webcomic series that has slowly been published into volumes. I read this as an ebook copy. This has definitely been the type of graphic novels that I really enjoy. I enjoyed the art style. The art style was pretty quirky and not super perfect, but I enjoyed it a lot. And I think that the characters were interesting, and the world that we're in and was interesting, how they meddle both fantasy aspects and science fiction aspects with robots and stuff. And one of my favorite things about this one, it has a really, really great friendship that is woven into the story. It follows this girl. We meet her in the beginning, and she's going to this place called the Gunner Creek Court, which is seems like it's in the middle of the nowhere, but it's really a big place. She goes to this school after her mother passed away, and she's on her own, and she goes to the school because that's what she said, that's what her mother wanted her to go. And so she ends up getting to class, and then she meets this girl whose name I've forgotten currently, and they instantly become friends, and they have a really strong friendship that I just adore completely. And there's a lot of mysterious things happening in this volume, and so I'm very eager to see how it's going to continue in the coming chapters, but I really enjoyed it. I end up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. I just highly enjoyed myself while reading it. And the last and final thing that I've been reading recently has been Silence of the Lamb by Thomas Harris. This is the second book in the Hannibal Lecter series, and it follows this girl called Claire Starling, who is she's a student trying to become an FBI agent. And as part of her studies or something like that, she's being picked by Jack Crawford, who's one of the FBI agents that caught a lot of serial killers, including Hannibal Lecter. And he takes her in because he thinks that she might be able to help him with things, and she ends up having to try and talk to Hannibal Lecter to get some information about a serial killer that's currently on the loose. And so this is basically that story about that mystery, but also about Hannibal Lecter and what he's doing, and it's really interesting. Thomas Harris really knows how to write a good thriller and not have, it's a crime thriller, so sometimes they can be a little bit boring with police procedurals, but this is not the same thing because you put a student, she's not educated yet, although she is trying to find these clues. I don't think that you get the same as a normal police procedural. And then you have the very interesting chapters where she's talking to Hannibal Lecter, who's this genius of a person with sociopathic tendencies, obviously because he's eating people, but he's so interesting. Those chapters have been some of the best things in this book, obviously, which I think a lot of people would agree with when they've read it. But I also just enjoyed getting to know Claire Starling. I thought she was a pretty great protagonist, and definitely enjoyed myself while reading it. Though it looks short, it took me a lot longer to read it than I'd expected, because I read like 30 to 35 pages an hour when I read this, and usually I would be at around 50 pages an hour, so at least I'll be quite faster. But I ended up really enjoying myself by reading it at the end, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm very eager to see what will happen in the next ones, because things definitely happened that you would like to explore more. There are 4 books total in this series, and the next one is called, I think, Hannibal, just Hannibal, and then there's Hannibal Rising, or it's Hannibal Rising and Hannibal, I don't know which order they go in, but I'll figure that out and get them from the library, because I'm pretty sure they have all 4. So yeah, highly recommend this series if you're interested. I recommend you start with Red Dragon, even though you don't necessarily have to have read it before you read this one, because it follows a different character. The first one you follow Will Graham, and he's trying to solve a mystery case. In this one you follow Clarice Starling, and she's trying to solve a mystery case. So you follow different protagonists in both of them, and I think that will be the same in the next ones, but I'm not sure. This was definitely great, and I've been talking for like half an hour now. So these were all of the books that I've been reading over the past couple of weeks. Definitely let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of the books and what you thought of them. If you have any recommendations to me, as usual, I'd like to know that as well. What have you been reading recently? And yeah, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very, very soon. Goodbye!